Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. Big week for everybody globally, maybe only in North America, but football, college week 1, week 2, NFL week 1. Not for nothing, but I'm here in Philly in anticipation of the opening of the season with the Falcons and the Eagles. It will have been played by the time this is posted, but the legend lives on in Philadelphia. Speaking of legend, the global poobah editor of Reuters, Dan Colarusso. How are you this fine football season?
I am feeling legendary. Fresh off my annual football ritual, which is drafting Giants for some reason in my fantasy league. But yeah, so the NFL has had its issues, starting another season. But it still has the national anthem protest dogging it. It still has the CTE issues dogging it. And now we throw in the mix gambling, and Jerry Jones, the iconoclastic owner of the Cowboys, was the first team to step up and do a deal. He announced a deal today. It's Thursday with WinStar World Casino and Resort. And it's the first official casino designation for the league. And this is becoming a thing. And this will become a revenue source for the league. Rick, and I know you have some feelings about the gambling mix, and you have a pretty good interview with Nick Saban today. So give me your insight on how the gambling is going to affect the financial tenor of the league.
Well, way back in the leather helmet days and when we were putting wooden seats on stadiums, not that long, but when I was involved with the NFL, there was one very clear admonition when we put public-private partnerships together. Stay away from casinos, from Indian gaming, from anything that smacked of gambling. Chinese wall, you couldn't put the stadiums on Indian land. You couldn't use Indian revenue to help finance the bonds. You couldn't use gambling revenue, and on and on and on and on because of the touchy distinction. Well, the slope done slipperied, and the bottom line years later is that the gambling Pandora's box was open at the Supreme Court level, but then how do you monetize? Well, the NBA, as you know, as we flagged 3 months ago, did a very novel deal. Adam Silver got out ahead of it again with MGM Casinos, $50 million deal to quote-unquote sell the data, but also develop marketing deals. And the states were going to get their money from gambling. The leagues wanted it, but how do you get it? They wanted 1% across the board. That didn't fly. Now it is each league trying to do casino deals individually. The NBA went to it. The NFL said, well, we were beaten out from that one. So last week, they changed a rule in the dead of night to allow teams to be able to accept advertising from casinos and daily fantasy sites that operate sports books and shoulder programming during preseason game telecasts. Well, it wasn't that long until casinos developed deals with teams. Jerry Jones, WinStar, Jerry Jones, and the Star, and Pepsi and Reebok years ago set the stage and began the trend. And here it is 15 years later doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, Jones again, he has the clout with the quality and the visibility of the team to make this deal and to be first in the mix. And it just goes to the trend in sports. And it's really funny how fantasy was a gateway drug to gambling for these leagues, and it really is really manifesting itself in a way you wouldn't have expected.
Well, it's all about money, 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 and we'll talk to a couple of NFL guys next week in our interview, but the interview this week is talking about iconoclastic, maybe the best coach of all time, certainly the best active coach. Nick Saban had a record before he blew away Louisville, begin this season, of 127-20. He had won his 5 national championships, will win many more. And if you created a Hall of Fame for coaches, Nick Saban would be right there. So here he is, in all his glory, philanthropic as well, Nick Saban. So Pop Warner football was a big part of your dad's life. Tell us what you remember about growing up in West Virginia and being your dad's son, basically.
Yeah. Well, I had great parents. I was very fortunate, but Anyone out there that their dad has been their coach, that's an experience in and of itself. But my dad actually started Pop Warner football in our area in West Virginia. And it was a difficult area because we had like 7 coal mining towns that were up in hollows, and the players had they couldn't get to practice because we all got around hitchhiking, and if the shift didn't change, there wasn't much traffic. So a lot of them didn't play sports. They didn't have the opportunity to get some of the life lessons that you can learn from playing sports. So my dad bought this little orange school bus, all right, and it had all these quotes like it's, things that would help you be successful, like it's more important to be nice than it is to be important, things like that.
Did he buy the bus with the quotes on them, or he put them on?
No, he put them all on there. But we would go to practice. He would go pick up everybody in all these hollows, take them to practice. We would practice, take everybody home. Take about 45 minutes, and of course I was the first one on the bus and the last one off because that was home. That was the home stop. But he really taught us the importance of work ethic, investing in your time and something rather than spending it. You reap what you sow, perseverance, and how you have to continue to learn from your failings, how to overcome adversity, discipline to do things right. I mean, the old saying that I say all the time, you're going to suffer through one of 2 things in life, the pain of discipline or the pain of disappointment. That was on the bus. It was there. All right. So all these things go way back. Yeah. But the opportunities that created, I mean, I know he had, not outside of myself, 3 players that, made All-American at West Virginia University and graduated from college and had a lot better lives, and they may never have participated if it wasn't for that. And I'm sure that if you ask any of them, they would say, just like me, that a lot of those things that I learned playing, the value of athletics is really, really important to developing a lot of the characteristics that help you be successful in life. Pride in performance, overcoming adversity. I mean, all kinds of things as a competitor that makes you have a much better chance to be successful in life.
It sounds like the secret sauce is the education early on.
Well, that's what we believe in, because I think football is the greatest team game that there is, and I don't think it's a dangerous game, but I think that it can be if it's not coached, where people are doing the fundamentals correctly, and not putting their players in positions where they're going to get multiple, head banging, that could, promote, issues. And I don't think that we have to do that to have a good game, and I don't think you have to do that to be a good coach. And there's a lot of these old-fashioned bow in the ring type drills that have no place in football, that nobody needs to do. And that's one of the reasons that we want to get as many of these coaches here and try to show them a better way, that they can be more effective in their teaching progression and actually create more safety for the player.
Let's talk about the better way off the field. The Knicks Kids Foundation, what you've done with Terry as far as some of the issues, not only the capital improvements, but the tornado relief in Tuscaloosa. Talk about all of that from your perspective.
Well, that goes back to my dad too, because he didn't just pick these kids up in that bus and take them to practice. He sort of adopted them all. All right, so when their basketball blew up, he took them to town and got them another one. When the rim at the church wasn't shootable anymore, he got them a new one. My mom always said, if you ever have the opportunity, your dad's legacy was to help young people. Do something to do that. So Nick's Kids stands for Big Nick, not Little Nick. I'm Little Nick. All right, but Miss Terry and the people who support Nick's Kids have done a phenomenal job of, I think, being able to create a lot of positive things in our community. We've done the 17 for 17, which is 17 homes that we've rebuilt since the tornado for every national championship. And our players have contributed to each one of those homes. You know, we have player days where they come and work, and they give back to the community as well. We've given over $7 million to children's organizations in the Southeast over the last 10 years. We do first generation scholarships, community center at the church. We're building a school at the Juvenile Delinquent Center to promote education, graduating from high school, and teaching a welding trade. So these guys aren't repeat offenders. They have something they can do in the community. So all these things give us tremendous positive self-gratification by giving back, helping other people. Don't really feel much that we do that makes us feel better than when we help someone else. And my dad's old saying was, "No man stands as tall as when he stoops to help a child." So that's what we tried to carry on, and we're going to try to continue that in the future, and we certainly thank all the people who have supported Nick's Kids.
So just a broader perspective, Pop Warner also teaches leadership and obviously discipline, focus, some of the traits you were talking about. And so how do you make sure that your kids, you recruit and have an obligation long term, do the right thing, say the right thing, behave the right way off the field as well?
Well, our whole goal in the program here is to help our players be more successful in life for having been involved in the program. So, their thoughts, their habits, their priorities, the choices and decisions they make are going to go a long way to helping them create value. And that starts with the kind of person that they are, the kind of character they have, the kind of integrity they have, the kind of trust you can have in them. And that all comes from the basic values that we try to establish that they have to buy into to really play and be to the standard as a person, as a student, and as a player that we would like for them to be. And we try to create a culture of accountability for them to do that. But I'm very pleased and proud with the success that we've had. But those same things, just so everybody's clear, I had the opportunity to learn when I played Pop Warner. And I think that's the one thing that everybody should really, really focus on, is if we don't have these kind of sports opportunities for our young people, where do they learn these things in what they do now? And, in some cases, kids don't even play outside anymore. Yeah. All right, but they will go outside for organized activities. And I think these organized activities, the commitment, the work ethic, the discipline, the focus, all the things that you mentioned are really important. And where do you get that if you don't participate in something?
And substantively, you understand it, it's easy, you're speaking from the heart, you were a defensive back at Kent State, and then you went through, now you're on the greatest leaders in the history of the world list from Fortune magazine. It is kind of interesting. How much of that was intuitive, and how much of that is just learned from heroes and history, and where does that all come from?
Well, I think it started when I was young, and I think it started with the lessons I learned from my parents. Yeah. They had a high standard and high expectation, but they also had tremendous compassion for other people. And it was always instilled in me that you need to set a good example. You need to be somebody that somebody can emulate. That was the expectation. But there was also an expectation there that you have to care enough for other people to help them for their benefit. And the combination of those two things, I think, is the fundamental start of being a leader, because those two things are really important parts of being able to impact other people. And it was always about just do it for one person. I think a lot of people think leadership has to be a group dynamic. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's the power of one. It's one person affecting one person who affects another person, and then it just grows. So I think it started at an early age for me. And then I think I was really fortunate that I had some great mentors. You know, my high school coach, Earl Keener, Don James, my college coach, fabulous, you know, example of what you needed to do to be successful and to be a good leader. And so I feel very, very fortunate with those opportunities, and then the opportunities I had as a coach to impact other people in a leadership position. And that's the one thing that I think I'll miss most about coaching, is not being a part of a team and not being able to lead and impact other people when the day comes that I can't do this, which I hope is not soon.
It's kind of fun to end on this. So I'm a Miamian, and we've got a kid who is a defensive back, but he's being called a Swiss Army knife because he's going to play everywhere. And Minka Fitzpatrick writes a kind of farewell long letter. He says, "Thank you, Alabama." And he said, "I chose Alabama because I wanted to be at a place that would push me to become the best version of myself I could possibly be, and man, did it ever." You read something and you hear something like that, and I'm sure it makes you proud.
No doubt. I mean, it really does. And that's what we want for our players. We want them to have a great experience here, feel like they've grown as people, and that they have a better chance to be successful in life, on and off the field. I think Minka probably is one of those guys that will be a tremendous ambassador because of the experience he had here. And I think that's a basic fundamental part of having great tradition, which has always been something that makes Alabama special.
So Nick Saban speaks about money, although he does it secondarily. He talks about philanthropy, and he talks about building his program, and therefore he gets to speak about revenue. But a lot of colleges are doing a lot of different things, selling naming rights like never before. Alaska Air did a deal with the University of Washington for Husky Stadium, and Southern Cal and the airline sponsorship they did. Kroger now a 12-year, $22 million deal, the University of Kentucky. But the bottom line of all of that is that gambling may come to colleges as well, but also naming, alcohol revenue, a lot of that. Colleges are generating just as much concern about the almighty dollar as the pros are, aren't they? And what do you take away from all of this?
In the Charity Begins at Home department, Nick Saban will make $74 million over the next 8 years, I believe, or 7 years. So Alabama is hopefully getting its money's worth. So when you're paying a coach that kind of money, the financial equilibrium has to go to naming rights, revenue deals, equipment deals, apparel deals, whatever you may have to lock in. So you understand how the star system in college football and the pool of money that's out there with TV rights makes teams excited about getting a Nick Saban. And that's really an interesting. That's a dynamic that's not going away. We may get some income inequality. We may get a haves and have-nots situation, but there still does seem to be relatively, on a relative basis, strong pools of revenue for these teams to make paying a coach more than you pay the president of the university worthwhile. But Saban did hit on one thing, and he talked a lot. It was very nice how he talked about his father and how he organized Pop Warner leagues. But he really mentioned the joy of football without the contact. And I thought that was particularly interesting. He mentioned drills that you do in high school teams and Pop Warner teams and kids under 12. And it's really good to hear him talking about that because he has the kind of voice that people will listen to. He's not an aggrieved parent. He's not anyone who's sued anyone. He's not a helmet manufacturer. He is talking about football in its purest sense, that people think that he's he's seen as a visionary on it. So when I hear him talk about drills that are too dangerous for children to do, I think that's really a worthwhile thing, and especially with the CTE. Parents, I have friends parents of high schoolers now, and I'm sure you have some people in your social circles that are the same, but they really agonize about letting their kids play football. And it's not a decision. I always, I say that I'm glad I have a daughter because I wouldn't want to make that decision because I love football so much and I loved playing as a kid. And I really did. Strangely, I really enjoyed practice more than I enjoyed the games. I enjoyed the camaraderie, the drills, the fun of it. And you always mock me as being a little person. I'm a diminutive ethnic. But the idea that, football the violence level of football just goes up exponentially with the quality of athlete, it does make the game a dangerous thing. So it was good to hear Saban talk about safety, because that is a direct economic issue. And if the league doesn't want to acknowledge it, they're blind, and the league has to start to understand the other levels of football that really attract people.
Mocking you about diminutively ethnic is just a statement of fact. It has no emotional baggage attached to it. And then more important than that is that Nick Saban can be the voice of reason when he deals with this issue, and you want to hear from him more and more and more, especially when you look at the revenues in the SEC. We find it instructive as we head into the second week of college football that of the top 10 schools revenue-wise in football, there are a clear preponderance from the SEC. Alabama, Texas A&M, Georgia, LSU, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee. What that does is gives Nick Saban a pretty strong and stable perch from which to talk about social change. And of course, you hear from him in a very positive way as we go forward. Rick Horrow, speak with you next week. Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. Our producer, Alex Cohen. Associate producer, Freddie Joyner. Assistance provided by Carlos Swadek, Tanner Simpkins, Jesse Leeds, and Jamie Swimmer. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso. I'm Rick Horrow. Thanks again for listening. See you next time on Keeping Score.